It was an ordinary afternoon at the security checkpoint, the hustle of travelers moving through with their usual routine. But then something unusual happened, a disturbance that would turn an average day into something extraordinary. Sarah, a young, visibly pregnant woman, walked up to the security station. Her gentle smile faded as she noticed the large German shepherd named Max, who was positioned near the entrance. Max, usually calm and obedient, immediately froze, his piercing eyes fixed on her. For a moment, the dog stood still, his posture tense. Then, without warning, he started barking loudly, aggressively. The noise echoed through the terminal, causing heads to turn in confusion. Sarah took a few cautious steps forward, trying to ignore the barking, but Max wouldn't stop. His ears were flat against his head, his eyes wide with distress, and his barks were sharp, urgent. John, one of the security officers, noticed the growing tension. He glanced at Max, then at Sarah. He knew Max well. The dog never barked like this unless something was wrong. "Something's off," John muttered under his breath, stepping toward the woman. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside for a moment." Sarah, startled by the sudden attention, tried to smile. "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaky. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just need to get through." But Max's barking grew louder, more frantic. He was nearly beside her now, his body tense, his eyes darting from Sarah's face to her abdomen. John, sensing the dog's anxiety, exchanged a quick glance with his partner, another security officer. They both knew something wasn't right. "Ma'am, please follow us to the screening room," John said firmly. His calm demeanor was betrayed by the tension in his voice. "We just need to check a few things." As Sarah followed John and his partner into the small, quiet security screening room, she could feel her heart rate rising. The air felt thick with uncertainty, the tension between her and Max palpable. She could see the concern in the eyes of the security officers as they moved, their hands close to their radios, ready to act. Max, still fixated on her, stood by her side, his gaze unwavering. His barking finally subsiding, but replaced by a low, persistent growl. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though the anxiety was creeping in. She had never been in a situation like this before. Nothing about it made sense. She had nothing to hide, no contraband to worry about. And yet the dog's strange behavior had cast a shadow of doubt over her confidence. John, ever the professional, nodded reassuringly but didn't let his guard down. "Just a precaution, ma'am," he said, motioning for her to stand still as he reached for a small handheld scanner. "Max is just sensitive sometimes. He's been trained to pick up on things. Right now, it's not just you. He's been like this for the past few minutes." Despite his calm words, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and a cold shiver ran down her spine as Max continued to stare at her, growling intermittently. It was like the dog could sense something she didn't, something dangerous, something hidden. As the officers ran their scanners over her belongings, Sarah felt a sudden sharp pain in her abdomen. She gasped, clutching her stomach instinctively, her breath catching in her throat. The pain came and went in waves, each more intense than the last. She staggered slightly, and Max's growl became more pronounced. John stepped forward immediately. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I'm fine," Sarah stammered, her voice shaky. She wanted to assure them, but the pain was becoming unbearable. She could feel her legs weakening under her, her body trembling. "I think it's just a contraction. Nothing to worry about." But Max wasn't so easily fooled. His eyes widened, and he began barking again, more urgently this time, as if he knew something was terribly wrong. His barks were filled with desperation, and his body was stiff with tension. He darted closer to Sarah, his head bumping against her side, as if trying to steady her, to warn her. John's instincts kicked in. "Call an ambulance," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. "She's in trouble. Something's wrong." The moment John's words echoed through the room, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The tension in the air was thick, as though time itself had slowed. The medical team on standby outside the room rushed in, alerted by the call for help. Sarah's breath grew shallow, and she stumbled, clutching her side in agony as another wave of pain coursed through her. It wasn't just a contraction, something was horribly wrong. Max, still beside her, kept up his frantic barking. His body was now rigid, his ears pinned back, eyes wide with an almost unnatural intensity. The medical team immediately took action, positioning Sarah on a nearby stretcher and quickly examining her. The team's leader, a calm and experienced paramedic named Rachel, moved with practiced precision. "We need to get her to a hospital now," she ordered. "Get an IV in her, and make sure we've got all the supplies ready for an emergency procedure. I think she's experiencing an internal rupture." At the mention of the rupture, Sarah's blood ran cold. She had no idea what that meant, but the urgency in Rachel's voice left no room for doubt. This was not just another delivery, it was a life and death situation. Max stood still beside her, his body poised, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. He seemed to be guarding her, watching over her with an unwavering loyalty that, though unconventional, felt like her only lifeline. His eyes locked with Sarah's, and for a fleeting moment, she found comfort in his gaze, as if to say, "I won't let anything happen to you." John stepped back, watching the chaos unfold with quiet resolve. Max has never been wrong before, he muttered to himself, his expression tight with concern. He turned to Rachel. "If it wasn't for Max, we wouldn't have known." He knew something wasn't right. Rachel nodded grimly. "It's instinct, and right now, it's saving her life." The ambulance arrived moments later, the team loading Sarah onto the stretcher and rushing her outside. The cold night air hit her skin, but she barely noticed. The only thing that mattered was the searing pain in her abdomen and the rush of fear that gripped her heart as she felt her world spiral into a terrifying unknown. Max followed closely, never leaving her side. As the doors to the ambulance slammed shut, Max's presence outside was the only thing that gave Sarah even the faintest sense of hope. He was still there. He had saved her, hadn't he? He was the only thing that stood between her and the unknown. As the ambulance sped away, John stayed behind, his gaze fixed on the disappearing vehicle. He felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the dog who had just proven his worth beyond measure. The ambulance ride felt endless. Every bump and turn seemed to intensify the pain Sarah was feeling. She gripped the sides of the stretcher, trying to focus on her breath. But it was hard to think clearly when every wave of agony seemed to steal her focus. She wanted to scream, but the only thing she could manage was soft gasps between the contractions. Max, who had followed them in the back of the ambulance, remained in the rear compartment, pacing back and forth restlessly. His instinctive vigilance was palpable, a silent but powerful presence. Sarah tried to smile at him through her pain, her breath shallow. "Thank you, Max," she whispered weakly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ambulance. The paramedics worked quickly, speaking to each other in urgent tones. But all Sarah could focus on was the thought that she might not make it. Her mind raced, thinking about her baby, about her family, and about everything she hadn't yet done. Was it too late? It wasn't until they arrived at the hospital that Sarah finally felt like she could breathe again, if only slightly. The medical team wheeled her quickly through the emergency doors, their movements efficient, calculated. Max, though still agitated, was quickly escorted outside, reluctantly separated from Sarah. But even then, she could hear him barking as though he were unwilling to leave her alone. The hospital was a blur of lights and voices, a cacophony of medical staff moving fast, their urgency seeping into Sarah's bones. It was all a blur, and yet somehow, she felt an odd sense of relief in the chaotic moments. She had made it. She was here, and she wasn't alone. Max had ensured that. Doctors and nurses surrounded Sarah, gently guiding her to an examination room. The machines began to beep around her as they connected her to IVs and monitors, their quick movements indicating how serious her condition was. Dr. Harris, a seasoned physician, approached her with a calm demeanor but urgency in his eyes. He looked down at her chart before turning to meet her gaze. "You're in serious condition," he said softly, but with reassuring authority. "You've experienced an internal rupture, which could have caused massive complications for both you and the baby. But we acted fast, and we're going to do everything we can." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her body trembling, but she nodded in understanding. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. She had never felt so small and vulnerable, yet at the same time, so profoundly grateful. Moments later, the team moved into action, performing a delicate surgery to stabilize her condition. Max's barks faded into the background, but the thought of him, the dog who had acted when no one else did, kept her grounded, pushing her to hold on. It felt like an eternity before Sarah awoke, her body sore but alive. The first thing she noticed was the soft pressure on her hand. She looked up and saw her husband beside her, his eyes filled with relief. But what really caught her attention was the small envelope he was holding in his hand. "Sarah, you made it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "The baby's fine too. They're both okay." Sarah's heart swelled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As her husband reached into the envelope, he pulled out a note, crinkled but carefully written. He smiled softly as he handed it to her. The note was simple, but it carried a message Sarah would never forget. "To Max, my angel. You saved our lives. I will be forever grateful. Thank you for everything. Sarah."